The Deacon might not be the most famous creature in the Alien franchise, but it sure as hell is one of the strangest. Born in the final moments of Prometheus, this lanky, blue-skinned beast isn't your usual acid-blooded killer. It came out of a chaotic mess of alien biology. Black goo, engineers, infected humans, and a mutated squid monster called the Trilobite. That mix gave us something entirely new, something strange. The Deacon didn't crawl out of an egg like a classic Xeno. No, it was born through a weird tangled chain of events that make it feel like nature gone rogue. In this marvelous video, we're going to break down what the Deacon is, where it came from, and how it fits into the evolving design of the Xenomorph family tree. We'll look at its origin, what makes its body so different, and how it might be the missing link between human experiments and the monsters we know from Alien. If you thought the regular Xenos were weird, wait till you meet these. The Deacon is a freak of sci-fi evolution, and that's exactly why it deserves a closer look. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What even is the Deacon, and where did this freaky thing come from? The Deacon, introduced in 2012's Prometheus, is one of the weirdest and most fascinating creatures to ever crawl out of the Alien universe. It wasn't made in a lab, and it wasn't born through any traditional alien method. Instead, it came from a bizarre fusion of alien biology, black goo alchemy, and really unfortunate timing. This thing didn't come from an egg laid in a hive or a queen's reproductive cycle. It was born out of pure, unpredictable mayhem. And that's what makes it so intriguing. It pops up in Prometheus for just a few seconds in the final scene, but that was more than enough to leave people with a ton of questions. It's not a xenomorph, but it's close, kind of like an early sketch before the Alien franchise gave us the slick, black killing machines we know as xenomorphs. The Deacon's life cycle isn't neat or clean like the classic xenomorph path we all know. You don't get an egg, a facehugger, a chest burster, and then the final monster. No, it's messy. Let's start from the top, and fair warning, it gets weird, fast. It all starts with that black goo. The engineers, a race believed to be responsible for creating the human race, created this biomechanical liquid as a kind of all-purpose death serum, capable of mutating, rewriting DNA, and creating brand new life. When it hits a living thing, it evolves or weaponizes the biology. So how does it begin? When the crew of the Prometheus lands on LV-223 and starts poking around, things go sideways really fast. Charlie Holloway, a scientist, gets infected with it without even realizing it. A tiny drop of black goo in his drink is all it takes to start scrambling his biology at the molecular level. Now, here's where things go from bad to worse. The goo hijacks his DNA and starts changing him. His DNA starts to mutate, and he does the most logical thing imaginable for a guy turning into science soup. He hooks up with Elizabeth Shaw. Despite being declared infertile earlier in the film, Shaw somehow becomes instantly and violently pregnant with a creature that shouldn't exist. Obviously, it's not a baby, not a parasite, but something peculiar, and it doesn't take its sweet time either. That something grew rapidly and into a squid-like creature, the Trilobite, which was essentially a turbo-sized facehugger with more limbs. Shaw wakes up horrified to find herself pregnant, way too fast for it to be natural. She gets it surgically removed in a self-performed C-section that's easily one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the entire Alien franchise. Shaw survives, barely, and the Trilobite is left to grow on its own. Once it's loose, it finds the last surviving engineer, the same species that built the black goo, and latches onto him. The Trilobite, now fully grown, wraps itself around his face and implants something deep inside the chest cavity, and then lets nature run its horrifying course. And yes, it works. Black goo mutations or not, the engineer starts convulsing. His chest starts to bulge and crack, and outbursts a completely new creature. Not quite a xenomorph, this is the Deacon, with blood, teeth, and everything. That's its birth. So unlike the traditional xenomorph cycle that's almost ritualistic, the Deacon comes from mutation stacked on mutation, like the universe glitched and coughed out something that it didn't really plan for. Well, that's it. The Deacon just vanishes from canon after that final scream. Nobody really knows what the Deacon would have done if it had stuck around. Would it grow into a queen? Would it evolve into something closer to a Xeno? Turn into an Ultramorph? We never get those answers on screen, but here's where things get exciting. Some fans believe it's more than a freak accident. It's a prototype. The engineers were clearly experimenting with black goo to weaponize life itself. The Deacon might have been one of the first on the way to the perfect organism we eventually meet in Alien. Why is it called the Deacon? Now, the name Deacon didn't come from the movie's characters or any part of the film's official dialogue. No one in Prometheus sees that blue horror burst out of the engineer and yells, "Oh no, it's a Deacon." Nah, this name came from the production team behind the scenes. It's a bit of a nickname that was passed around on set and it stuck. But why the name? Because of its head. The back of the Deacon's head looks pointy, almost like an arrow-shaped dome. If you look at it closely, preferably while it's not lunging at you, it looks eerily similar to a bishop's mitre. That's the ceremonial hat worn by Christian clergy, especially bishops and deacons. You know that tall triangular hat? So someone on the crew pointed that out, and Deacon became its unofficial name. Kind of ironic too. You have this unholy something that bites its way out of a person's chest, and someone thought, yep, let's name it after a priest. It's kind of absurd. Take something that's obviously horrific and slap a churchy name on it, because why not? Now, depending on where you lurk in the fandom, the Deacon goes by a few other names as well, none of which sound as polished or church-approved. It's also been casually referred to as a Proto Xenomorph, especially in breakdown videos and lore articles. Proto because it's not quite evolved into a xenomorph yet, but it's clearly on the evolutionary roadmap. It's not the same thing, but it's definitely in the same nasty family. Some fans also lump it under umbrella terms like black goo offspring, depending on what theory or lore breakdown you're reading. The black goo causes wildly different mutations depending on the host. In this case, it went from Holloway, an infected human, to Shaw, a human female, to Trilobite, a mutated facehugger, to Engineer, the final host, and finally to the Deacon. So, calling it a black goo offspring works if you're trying to emphasize the experimental, unplanned nature of its creation. You'll also find fans and theorists calling it an engineer hybrid or something similar, especially when discussing the idea that the engineers might have designed this process or were experimenting with similar creatures. The Deacon doesn't seem like a one-off fluke. It feels like something the engineers were either trying to create or something that happened because of their hubris with the goo. Despite all the names and technical labels, Deacon is the one that stuck. It's weirdly charming in a dark way, like giving a pet name to your worst biological mistake. It's become shorthand for a specific kind of horror, something familiar yet off, something sacred looking but born from pure genetic heresy. And if you ask most fans what it is, they'll say the Deacon, not the protoform bioweapon embryo resulting from intraspecies Xeno implementation, because nobody's got time to say all that when this thing's trying to bite your dang head off. Is the Deacon part of alien canon or just one scene with ambition? Absolutely. Let's clear the air. Yes, the Deacon is absolutely canon. Not kind of, not maybe. It's canon. It's full canon, full stop. Since it shows up in Prometheus, a film directed by the Ridley Scott, and meant to serve as a direct prequel to Alien, the Deacon officially sits in the main timeline of the franchise. It's not from a side comic or some fan sketch. It's in a movie with a massive budget, a theatrical release, and a full spot in the Alien timeline. And it was the big finale moment of Prometheus. If it bleeds on the big screen, it's part of the family. Weird looking, but still family. Now, to be fair, the Deacon was nowhere to be seen in Alien Covenant, which was released in 2017, which kind of left fans hanging. Instead, we got Neomorphs, Facehugger 2.0s, and David, an advanced android playing Dr. Frankenstein with his lab-grown xenomorphs. There was no Deacon sequel moment, no mention of that pointy-haired creature, no shrine, not even a dead one lying in the corner, nothing. And so, some fans started to wonder, was the Deacon quietly erased from the franchise? But none of that takes away from the fact that it is canon because of its Prometheus debut. Now here's where things get a little dicey. The Deacon also shows up in the Fire and Stone comic series published by Dark Horse. That story continues after Prometheus and gives the Deacon a bit more screen time, or, well, page time, I suppose. But that part, that belongs to the expanded universe. It's official in terms of licensing, but it doesn't carry the same weight as the films when it comes to canon. So, while Fire and Stone adds layers to what the Deacon could be, that version lives in the what-if section rather than the big screen. So, the Deacon is 100% canon when you're talking about the movie universe. Because if a creature exists on screen in a major entry, and there's been no official word retconning it out, it's still canon. Yes, Alien Covenant took a sharp left turn and focused on synthetic life and David's monster-making hobbies, but that doesn't delete what came before. It just means the story veered off. Think of it like Star Wars. Nobody talks about Dexter Jettster's diner anymore, but that doesn't mean it never existed. Even if Alien Covenant didn't carry the Deacon's story forward, the creature's presence in Prometheus still cements it into the mythology. So if someone tells you the Deacon isn't canon, politely remind them, Prometheus was a real movie. That freaky tooth-headed alien baby was in it, and once something's out of the cinematic womb, you can't unbirth it. What does this thing look like anyways? Let's talk about what the Deacon actually looks like, because this thing wasn't exactly designed to be subtle. The Deacon looks like something straight out of a lab accident that almost worked. It's like someone tried to draw a Xeno from memory while blindfolded, with a squid in one hand and a butcher knife in the other. It's got that sleek alien DNA, but it's not polished like the classic Xenomorph. This thing is raw, skinny, and stretched out, almost unfinished. Let's start with the body. First off, the color palette. The Deacon isn't the classic black and silver biomechanical sculpture that H.R. Giger gave us with the OG Xenomorph. Nope. The Deacon has a bluish purple tone. The texture of its skin is slick and wet, almost glossier. You can see its muscle definition clearly. No armor plating, no biomechanical tubing, just smooth, sinewy flesh. It doesn't have that sleek armored skeleton yet. Instead, its body feels soft. The Deacon stands upright on two legs, tall and lean. Its limbs are long and thin, with sharp bony fingers ending in clawed hands. 4 fingers and a thumb. Then there's the head. You really can't miss it. It's long and narrow, curving backwards like a blade. It doesn't have the ridged dome of the Xenomorph, instead it's smoother. The back of its skull looks eerily similar to a bishop's mitre, which is both weird and unintentionally hilarious given how unholy this creature is. It doesn't have any eyes, at least none that are visible. Like Xeno's, it's either eyeless or has fully recessed sensory organs. Let's talk jaws, because if there's one part of a Xeno you always remember, it's the mouth. Unlike the Xenomorph's sideways tongue trick, the Deacon has a regular jaw that opens vertically, but it stretches far wider than it should, almost like it hasn't figured out how to close it properly yet. Its mouth is packed with needle-like sharp teeth in a predatory bite. There's something almost humanoid about the shape, but way more disturbing. It's the kind of smile you would expect from something that just clawed its way into existence and is ready to bite the first living thing it sees. Now here's where it gets even stranger. When the Deacon bursts out of the engineer at the end of Prometheus, it's still tethered to a thick umbilical cord dangling from its stomach. And it doesn't stop there. There's even a yellowish sac or cord around it during its birth, like a leftover from the messy way it came into the world. The Deacon doesn't have a tail in the scene we see, at least not one that's visible. It's also not dripping slime or surrounded by that eerie mist the classic aliens love. It's more animal than monster. It's clearly deadly, but it's not refined. It's got rough edges, the fresh off the factory floor look, and the posture of something that's not quite sure whether it should crawl, run, or kill. What's up with the umbilical cord and yellow sac? Okay, now we're getting into the really weird stuff. The Deacon's umbilical cord and that bright yellow sac it's still dragging around after birth. So right after the Deacon bursts out, you can see a long umbilical cord still stuck to its belly, connected to a squishy yellow sac. This thing pulses a bit, like it's alive, or was, at least until the Deacon hit the ground. Now, the Deacon is one of the only creatures in the entire Alien franchise that comes out with an umbilical cord still attached. No other Xeno does this, and this is where things get even more biological. Umbilical cords in natural organisms connect a fetus to the womb, transfer nutrients, oxygen, and remove waste. So what does this say about the Deacon? It means the Deacon wasn't implanted like a parasite. Instead, it was gestated like a baby. Now, the movie never explains it, so we're left to make sense of it based on what we know about how Xeno-type life forms develop and what we're seeing on screen. Most likely, this cord and sac setup worked like a life support system while the Deacon was growing inside the engineer. In real-world biology, amniotic sacs serve as protection. They keep the fetus safe from external shock and infection, cushion it from physical pressure, and carry nutrients. So if we run with that logic, this yellow sac was likely doing the same thing, shielding the developing Deacon embryo inside the engineer's body. That's deeply unsettling because it makes the Deacon feel born, not engineered. Alive, not programmed. The Xenomorphs, even in all of their terrifying perfection, still feel like weapons. Designed, deliberate, lethal. The Deacon feels like something accidentally conceived, a thing that wasn't supposed to exist, but was nurtured into being by a perfect alien body corrupted by black goo and squid DNA. It's also worth noting that the Deacon doesn't drop the sac immediately. For a few moments, it's still attached, like it didn't finish cutting the cord. Literally. That could mean it was still absorbing nutrients even after being born, or maybe it hadn't fully detached from the last traces of its weird synthetic womb. So yeah, it's messy, it's uncomfortable, and it's biologically insane, but the Deacon's birth is one of the most telling, underappreciated moments in the entire Prometheus mythos. That cord and that sac don't just make it look gross, they make it feel real, and somehow that makes it even scarier. Wait, it turned into a mountain? You thought it was freaky enough when it burst out of the engineer, wait till you hear what might have happened to its corpse. One of the strangest and most disturbing chapters in the Deacon story was when it stopped being a creature and became a place. Yeah, you heard that right. So let's jump into the Fire and Stone comic series by Dark Horse, part of the Alien Expanded Universe that picks up years after the events of Prometheus. And things get seriously weird, even by alien standards. So here's what went down. In Prometheus, Fire and Stone, we find out that the Deacon survived after the events of Prometheus. It didn't die after that bloody chest burst. Instead, it disappeared into the wilderness of LV-223. And thanks to that cursed black goo, the engineer's mutagenic liquid, it didn't stop changing. See, LV-223 was covered in this black pathogen, the same stuff that infected Holloway, mutated worms into monsters, and created the massive Trilobite. We already know it's unpredictable and alters DNA. A fresh Deacon corpse, already a walking contradiction of human, Xeno, and engineer DNA, starts reacting with the goo in a way no one expected. It begins to evolve again, but it doesn't grow a tail or sprout wings. Instead, it expands. Over time, its form stretched and transformed into what fans now call Goo Mountain. Its tissue keeps multiplying, almost like a cancer with a purpose. Eventually, it mutates so far past recognition that it becomes a massive, immobile, grotesque landmass and becomes part of the terrain itself. We're talking cliffs made of flesh, bones fused with roots, and tissue growing between stones. So no, the Deacon didn't decide to turn into a mountain. It got swallowed up by its own DNA. The mountain that explorers encounter later in the comics is what's left of the Deacon. It's gross, it's massive, and it's terrifying to think that it used to be a living organism. Proto Xenomorph? What does that even mean? Ah yes, the Proto Xenomorph label, because it totally earned that awkward family nickname. The term proto means first, early, or a primitive version of something. So when fans and writers call the Deacon a Proto Xenomorph, they're basically saying, this is what came before the Xeno we all know and fear. Not quite there, but on the way. The Deacon has the DNA, the attitude, and the hunger, but it hasn't quite hit that final form just yet. Let's be clear, the Deacon and the Xenomorph aren't identical, but they're definitely related. You look at the Deacon and go, yeah, I can kinda see where this is heading. First, there's the look. The Deacon and the Xenomorph both come out chest first, literally. They are born by tearing through the ribcage of a host, blood flying everywhere. That birth style is the big giveaway that they share a common origin. So why isn't it just called a Xenomorph? Because after that, that's where the differences come in. The Deacons don't have the same polish as the Xenos. The Deacon's body is slimmer, no tough exoskeleton. Xenomorphs, on the other hand, have that biomechanical, almost insect-like carapace. They are jet black in color with sinewy ridges and tubes running down their spines. You touch a Xeno, you hear a clink. You touch the Deacon, it probably would squish, we think? Then there's the head. The Deacon has a long, curved skull, almost like a dagger stuck to its face. Meanwhile, classic Xenos have that banana-shaped skull, smooth or ribbed depending on the version, with a slightly human silhouette hiding underneath. Now here's where things get really interesting. Abilities. Xenomorphs are stealthy, precise, and methodical. They know how to sneak through vents, pick off prey, and use strategy. They have acidic blood, a tail that works like a spear, and of course that nasty second jaw that fires out like a piston. The Deacon has none of that. No tail, no inner mouth as far as we've seen, only jagged teeth. No surprises behind the lips, no acid blood confirmed. This thing isn't calculating or cunning even. It stands, it screams, and it looks ready to charge. Another key difference between the Xeno and the Deacon is their life cycle structure. Xenomorphs have a clear, repeatable system: egg, then facehugger, a chestburster, and finally an adult. The Deacon is a product of everything gone wrong and shouldn't have happened to begin with. Human and black goo form a mutant sperm, which results in a Trilobite, which then latches onto an engineer, and it is then that we finally get a Deacon. That's why Proto Xenomorph fits. It does share the core template, but makes you look at it and think, close, but something's missing. The Deacon fits into the alien evolution tree like a freak experiment that almost nailed it. It's not the final product, not the starting point either. It's what you get when the engineers start dabbling in life creation with their bioweapon goo, throw in some human DNA, and end up with something that's halfway there but still feral and unstable. If you mixed it with a worm, you might get a snake monster, maybe. If you mixed it with humans, you might get mutations and weird pregnancies. That's where the Deacon comes in. All the right instincts, but still figuring things out. How large is the Deacon compared to other aliens? Okay, let's talk size, because in the alien universe, bigger usually means badder. And when it comes to the Deacon, well, it's definitely bad, but maybe not quite big. When the Deacon bursts out of the engineer at the end of Prometheus, it's already doing something unusual for a newborn. It stands upright. not like the wormy, snake-like chestbursters we've seen before. And it's already bigger than your average chestburster, fully bipedal, arms spread, and eerily confident for something that literally just exploded out of a rib cage. At birth, it's estimated to be about 6 to 7 feet tall, roughly the size of an average human adult. That's already taller than most Xeno chestbursters, which usually come out about the size of a large snake and have to grow into their final form. But it's also lean and wiry. Now compare that to the engineer, who's a full head taller than any human, around 9 to 10 feet tall. The Deacon doesn't match that height at birth, but it's got the structure and posture of something that could catch up fast. Given the right time and conditions, it could definitely size up to stand eye to eye with an engineer or even surpass one. Now let's compare it against the standard xenomorphs. Fully grown drones or warriors, like the ones in Aliens, stand around 7 to 8 feet tall, depending on the host species and variant. Queens go way beyond that, some over 15 feet tall when upright. Compared to those, the Deacon in its newborn form sits somewhere in between, and the Deacon looks unfinished. Not weak necessarily, but early stage. If it had lived and matured, there's a real chance it might have bulked up, evolved, or even molted into a more refined form. But because we never see an adult Deacon, or a second one at all, it remains in this eerie in-between state. Not fully born, but not fully evolved. Even the neomorphs, the white-skinned, spore-grown monstrosities from Alien Covenant, come out more refined than the Deacon. They're smaller, around 6 feet tall, but quicker, more agile, and even more specialized in how they kill. So where does that leave the Deacon? It's human-sized, but less dangerous looking than what came after. It's somewhere in that weird space of what could have been, but never to be seen again on screen. However, we already know that in the Fire and Stone comics, the Deacon mutates and fuses with the landscape and becomes a grotesque biomechanical mountain, way beyond any other Xeno in size, including the Queen. It's the biggest alien-born entity in the entire extended lore, even if it's technically more corpse than creature at that point. Despite all of this, you still shouldn't underestimate it. Even in its vulnerable, freshly born state, the Deacon looked like it could move fast, a creature that could chase down prey with speed and probably bite your face off in one go. It had the posture and stance of a hunter, even if it hadn't yet fully grown into an optimized killer. In that sense, it was visually intimidating, but in a very different way from the armored Xenos. Like a horror that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet, but whatever it became, it wouldn't be pretty. If we'd gotten a Prometheus 2, maybe we'd have seen it molt or evolve further, but as it stands, the Deacon was the first to be born, not the first to grow up. And in a family of acid-spitting nightmares, it's the weird sibling with potential. Beyond Prometheus. Where else did it show up? Oh, the poor Deacon, born screaming at the end of Prometheus and then pretty much vanished. No return in Alien Covenant, no cameo in other movies, not even a name drop. Ridley Scott moved the story towards David's engineered xenomorphs, leaving the Deacon's future hanging in the air. So if you're only watching the films, that's where the trail ends. But remember, it did show up again in 2014 in Dark Horse Comics' Prometheus Fire and Stone. Barely. As a mountain. It fuses with the environment and turns into this disgusting mountain-sized biomechanical mass. Not just big, huge. And that's it. The Deacon doesn't appear in any other games, novels, or animated projects. That's left the Deacon in this odd little cult corner of the fandom. Not quite forgotten, but definitely a what the hell was that? Fans still debate what it could have become, what it meant for the xenomorph evolution, or whether it was even meant to return before the sequels took a different turn. We never saw it run, we never saw it hunt. We don't even know if it survived more than a few hours, but its look, its birth, and its place in the Black Goo's chaotic legacy made it unforgettable. The Deacon became a symbol of everything terrifying about accidental creation, and sometimes that's enough to make a monster matter. Meet the Ultramorph, the one that got away. Oh yes, the Ultramorph, the creature that never made it to the big screen but was part of an early concept art and story draft during the development of Prometheus, which was then still going by the name Alien Engineers. The creature was supposed to be the final evolution of the Black Goo experiments, a gigantic beast, bigger, older, and nastier than anything we'd seen before. But alas, it never made it past the sketchbook phase. The Ultramorph was originally imagined as the result of a xenomorph being born from an engineer host, a being already genetically enhanced, physically massive, and biologically advanced. The result would have been a super Xeno, a god-tier predator born of gods themselves. That's the Ultramorph, Design-wise, the Ultramorph was meant to resemble a classic Xenomorph, but with a massive frame and a few ancient-looking features. The head was long and curved like a blade, similar to the Deacon's, but wider and thicker. The body was more armored and had all the bells and whistles that make a Xenomorph the perfect killing machine, but the Ultramorph didn't make it in. The creature was scrapped from Prometheus when Ridley Scott steered Prometheus away from direct alien territory and more into philosophical sci-fi mystery. The Ultramorph was too on the nose. The Deacon ended up taking its place, but the Ultramorph was something else entirely. You can still see fragments of the Ultramorph in the Deacon. The concept of a creature born from an engineer stayed. The elongated skull shape carried over. Even the idea of a Xeno born of a god was preserved, but in the form of a baby creature with unfinished edges. While the Ultramorph never made it to the screen, the fans haven't forgotten. It's shown up in concept art, books like The Art of Prometheus, and the imaginations of fans everywhere. You'll find fan art, 3D renders, even fan films imagining what might have happened if the script hadn't changed course. To this day, the Ultramorph is whispered about in fan circles as the monster that got away. What happened to the Deacon in the end? The Deacon's final fate is as bizarre as its birth, maybe even more so. You would think that something born in such a dramatic, explosive manner, screeching its way out of an engineer's chest, dripping with goo, would go on to terrorize at least one unlucky poor crew. Maybe a space station, a ship, a moon colony, something. But no, the Deacon vanishes. Perhaps it died off-screen, quietly. We'll never know. After literally screaming its way through the franchise, we never saw it again. It simply faded away. The only place we get any sense of closure is in the Fire and Stone comics, where we learn that the Deacon survived in the wilds of LV-223. But its body is bloated, swollen, and mutated beyond recognition into a freaking mountain. That's the last we ever see of it. It had one moment to its name, and then it quietly melted into the terrain, literally becoming part of the planet it was born on. So yeah, for all the mystery, all the promise, all the theorizing and creature design hype, the Deacon's fate is kinda sad. Marvelous verdict. Born to be a bioweapon, ripped out of an engineer, and dumped into a universe that didn't know what to do with it, this creature was supposed to be a big deal, but it never got its moment to shine, and by the time the comics picked up the story, it was already dead. Literally. Just one appearance, one terrifying birth, and a death that was buried under more questions than answers. That's the legacy the Deacon left behind, and yet that's exactly why it sticks in your head. The Deacon didn't need a franchise to matter. It was a weird little blip that hinted at something bigger. It was not another monster, but a messed up reflection of what happens when gods try to play with life and humans get caught in the middle. The Deacon may not have roamed the stars, but it left a mark. Short-lived, but deeply weird. And honestly, that's kind of why it's so cool and unique. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.